the easiest way to talk about it would be that for the upper middle class in the U.S., particularly younger people, things are often materially very comfortable, and there's also often a great sadness and emptiness, and it's difficult to think about and difficult to come up with answers in the abstract. And I think I had started that book after a couple of people, not close friends, but people I knew who were my age had committed suicide, and it just became obvious that something was going on. I think one of the ideas of the book is that there's a particular ethos in U.S. culture, especially in entertainment and marketing culture, that very much appeals to people as individuals, that you don't have to be devoted or subservient to anything else. There is no larger good than your own good and your own happiness. And that in the book, as best I can recall, characters who become drug addicts, there is a form, the root in English of addict is the Latin addicere, which means religious devotion. It was an attribute of beginning monks, I think. There's an element in the book in which various people are living out something that I think is true, which is that we all worship, and we all have a religious impulse. We can choose to an extent what we worship, but the myth that we worship nothing and give ourselves away to nothing is simply sets us up to give ourselves away to something different. For instance, pleasure, or drugs, or the idea of having a lot of money and being able to buy nice stuff. Or in the tennis academy, it's somewhat different. It's devotion to an athletic pursuit that requires a certain amount of sacrifice and discipline, but is nevertheless an individual sport, and one's trying to get ahead as an individual. I doubt this makes very much sense, but whatever the conditions of hopelessness you're talking about, at least in Infinite Jest, have to do, I think, with an American idea, and not a universal one, but one that I think kids get exposed to very early, that you are the most important, and what you want is the most important, and that your job in life is to gratify your own desires. That's a little crude to say it that way, but in fact it's something of the ideology here, and it's certainly the ideology that's perpetrated by television and advertising and entertainment, and the economy thrives on it. Well, of course, nobody tells you. I mean, mom and dad don't sit you down and say this. This is something very subtle, and is delivered by a great many messages. In just conversationally, do you get what I'm talking about? I rather doubt that Europeans' idea of America is very different from this. I mean, this is one enormous engine and temple of self-gratification and self-advancement, and in some ways it works very, very well. In other ways, it doesn't work all that well, because at least for me, it seems as if there are whole other parts of me that need to worry about things larger than me, that don't get nourished in that system.
And do you think the Europeans know that? Do you think
from the Europeans I've talked to, yeah. I mean, it's when I get in arguments with Europeans, it's that their view of it is sort of exaggerated and simplistic. It's a very complicated thing, and full of paradoxes and ironies and all kinds of stuff. And the idea that America is one great big shopping mall, and that all anyone wants to do is, you know, grasp their credit card and run out and buy stuff, is a stereotype, and it's a generalization. But as a way to summarize a certain kind of ethos in the U.S., it's pretty accurate, particularly after the elections we just had on Tuesday. It's the U.S. is not getting better in this area. It seems like it's getting worse.
Yeah, I mean, I've been coming here every year.
There's a streak of moralism in American life that extols the virtues of being grown up and having a family and being a responsible citizen. But there's also the sense of do what you want, gratify your appetites, because when I'm a corporation, appealing to the parts of you that are selfish and self-centered and want to have fun all the time is the best way to sell you things, right? And the point that emerges from that is that it's, I think, one more example of the American economic and cultural systems that work very well in terms of selling people products and keeping the economy thriving, do not work as well when it comes to educating children or helping us help each other know how to live and to be happy. If that word means anything, clearly it means something different from whatever I want to do. I want to take this cup and throw it right now. I have every right to. I should. You know, I mean, that we've seen it. We see it with children. That's not happiness. That feeling of having to obey every impulse and gratify every desire it seems to me to be a strange kind of slavery. Nobody talks about it as such, though. It talks about freedom of choice, and you have the right to have things, and spend this much money and you can have this stuff. Again, saying it this way, it sounds to me very crude and very simple, but that's sort of the way.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But I mean, once you're in your.
Does this make any sense to you?
Absolutely,
okay.
Of course.
And it works very well as a system for running an economy and keeping goods produced and sold, and it works wonderfully. The ways in which it doesn't work are much more difficult to talk about.
So what?
And one of the things it causes is tension and unhappiness in people. I don't think it's very complicated, and I don't think I've named the only reason for it. The paradox is that sort of tension and complication and conflict in people also makes them very easy to market to, because I can say to you, feeling uneasy, life feels empty. Well, here's something you can buy or something you can go do. It makes us. It makes for the economics term is inelasticity of demand. I demand all the time, no matter what the price of it is, and it works really well in an economic way. There's a difference, though, I think, between being mildly bored, but then there's another kind of boredom that I think you're talking about, which is reading requires sitting alone by yourself in a quiet room, and I have friends, intelligent friends, who don't like to read because it's not just bored. There's an almost dread that comes up, I think, here about having to be alone and having to be quiet, and you see that when you walk in. When you walk into most public spaces in America, it isn't quiet anymore. They pipe music through. And the music's easy to make fun of because it's usually really horrible music, but it seems significant that we don't want things to be quiet ever anymore. And to me, I don't know that I could defend it, but that seems to me to have something to do with when you feel like the purpose of your life is to gratify yourself and get things for yourself and go all the time. There's this other part of you that's the same part that can kind of is almost hungry for silence and quiet, and thinking really hard about the same thing for maybe half an hour instead of 30 seconds that doesn't get fed at all. And it makes itself felt in the body in a kind of dread in here. And I don't know whether that makes a whole lot of sense, but I think it's true that here in the U.S. every year the culture gets more and more hostile. And I don't mean hostile like angry, just it becomes more and more difficult to ask people to read or to look at a piece of art for an hour, or to listen to a piece of music that's complicated and that takes work to understand, because, well, there are a lot of reasons, but particularly now in computer and internet culture, everything is so fast. And the faster things go, the more we feed that part of ourselves, but don't feed the part of ourselves that likes quiet, that can live in quiet, that can live without any kind of stimulation. I don't know.
So, do you watch TV?
I don't have a TV, because if I have a TV, I will watch it all the time. So there's my little confession about how strong I am at resisting stuff. I watch TV over at friends' houses and stuff sometimes. I don't watch as much as I used to. I think part of the allure of both drugs and entertainment is escape, yes, from my problems and my life and having to be stuck in here. I can, pretend I'm James Bond or pretend to. It just it seems fine over the short haul as a way of life. It doesn't work all that well, though. No. So, if you're talking about the more general allure of drugs, to the extent that I understand it, which is about as specifically as I'm going to talk about it, it seems to me to be and this isn't a very original thing to say. It's a pretty natural extension of corporate capitalist logic, which is, I want to feel exactly the way I want to feel, which is good, for exactly this long, and so I will exchange a certain amount of cash for this substance, and I will do it. But it's all of course a lie, because the control gradually goes away, and it stops being that I want to do it and becomes that I feel I need to do it. And that shift from I want something to I feel I need it is a big one. Yes, I mean, most of the problems in my life have to do with my confusing what I want and what I need. See, it's a strange question, because who would say entertainment is bad? I mean, I wouldn't say entertainment is bad. But a model of life in which I have a right to be entertained all the time seems to me not to be a promising one, right? So, and this won't translate, but of course one of the insidious things about it is that entertainment is so goddamn entertaining. So like, imagine this show were running on American TV, and I were sitting in this hotel watching it. Okay, we've got this pointy-headed, nerdy guy talking about this stuff, or I've got, Pamela Anderson running on a beach, or a hilarious comedy. Which one am I going to watch? When I'm saying, there's no, if fighting against entertainment is even required, how does one do it unless? Well, there are two options. One is you direct the attack only to people who are willing to listen to the complexity, but those aren't the people who are enslaved by entertainment anyway. Or you find some way to make the attack on entertainment entertaining, in which case you've been captured by the very thing you're fighting against. It's very, very strange.
Yeah, that's exactly the dilemma.
Yes.
That's exactly it. I mean, are there any means of rebellion?
Sure.
So, what would it be?
Well, there are people doing it all over the place. I don't know about people rappelling down buildings and getting tear gassed and stuff. The people I know who are rebelling meaningfully, don't buy a lot of stuff, and don't get their view of the world from television, and are willing to spend 4 or 5 hours researching an election rather than going by commercials. And the thing about it is that in America we think of rebellion as this very sexy thing, and that it involves, you know, action and force and looks good. And my guess is the forms of rebellion that will end up changing anything meaningfully here will be very quiet and very individual, and probably not all that interesting to look at from the outside. I'm now hoping for less interesting rather than more interesting. Violence is interesting, and horrible corruption and scandals and rattling sabers and talking about war and demonizing a billion people of a different faith in the world. Those are all interesting. Sitting in a chair and really thinking about what this means, and why the fact that what I drive might have something to do with how people in other parts of the world feel about me isn't interesting to anybody else. That was very close to the truth, but I don't think it's going to make much sense. And plus, yeah, it's a little. I mean, I'm a writer. I'm not a politician or a political thinker or whatever. Just a scared little American living in California.